The day began like any other, with Manuel Hunter rushing through his morning routine. He slid on his usual work shirt, straightened his tie, and caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. 32, with a few gray hairs creeping into his brown hairline, but still fit. His reflection gave him confidence. His life felt solid. Lucy was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. Manuel leaned over, planting a quick kiss on her cheek. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, grabbing his travel mug. "Good morning," Lucy replied, not looking up from her screen. "You're running late." "Yeah, traffic's going to be brutal today." He took a swig of his coffee, grimacing as it burned his tongue. "What time will you be home?" Lucy barely paused. "Late. There's that dinner with Norman, remember?" Manuel nodded, trying to remember if she had mentioned it before. "Right, the boss dinner." Norman Coleman, Lucy's boss, had been the topic of conversation a lot recently. Manuel figured it was part of the promotion game. He hated the guy's arrogant smile whenever he met him, but Lucy swore it was harmless. He walked into the living room, where his mother-in-law, Karen, sat with her knitting, already immersed in her daily routine. "Good morning, Mom," Manuel greeted, forcing a smile. He still wasn't used to having her around all the time. A few months ago, Lucy had insisted they let her mother move in just for a while after she lost her house in a messy divorce. That while had turned into months. Karen's constant presence sometimes made him feel like a guest in his own home. Karen didn't even look up from her needles. "Morning, Manuel." Shaking off the tension, Manuel grabbed his briefcase and made for the door. Before he could turn the knob, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Lucy. "Don't forget, I'll be out tonight. Important meeting with my boss. Don't wait up." Manuel glanced over his shoulder at Lucy, who was now engrossed in her emails. A strange sensation tugged at his gut, but he quickly shook it off. Lucy was ambitious. She had been gunning for this promotion for months, and Manuel respected that. He knew how much it meant to her, even if it had started eating away at their time together. With a forced smile, he pocketed his phone. "All right, see you later. Good luck with the dinner." Lucy gave a quick, absent nod. "Thanks. Don't stay up." Manuel left, pulling the door shut behind him. Outside, the fresh air filled his lungs, but that strange feeling lingered. It gnawed at him during his drive to work, even as he listened to the morning news and dodged the usual heavy traffic. He told himself it was nothing, just the usual work stress and the increasing strain of having Karen around. But as he turned into the parking lot at his office, something about Lucy's text bothered him. "Don't wait up." She had said that before, but it felt different this time. At work, Manuel's day unfolded as usual, filled with meetings, phone calls, and the endless cycle of tasks that consumed his time. He was good at his job, reliable, respected. His coworkers liked him, and his boss knew he was someone who got things done. But today, Manuel's focus slipped. That nagging feeling about Lucy's dinner crept back into his mind, distracting him every few minutes. During lunch, he sat in the break room, absent-mindedly scrolling through his phone. He thought about texting Lucy to see how her day was going, but something held him back. He didn't want to seem like the paranoid husband. She was working hard, pushing for a promotion that could make their lives better. Still, a thought flickered. What if this dinner wasn't just about work? He shook his head. Stop being ridiculous. By late afternoon, Manuel tried to push the unease aside. After all, Lucy was probably stressed about the dinner too. She needed his support, not his doubts. But as he closed his laptop and headed out for the day, the tension in his chest remained. He checked his phone again. No messages from Lucy. Not even an update on how her day was going. Manuel pulled into the driveway earlier than usual, eager to unwind after a long day at the office. He had decided to leave work early, hoping to catch some quiet time before Lucy returned from her dinner with her boss, Norman. He hadn't been able to shake the uneasy feeling from the night before, but he was trying his best to trust her. The front door creaked as Manuel stepped inside. The house was unusually quiet, save for the muffled sound of the television coming from the living room. As he walked in, Karen's voice greeted him with an unsettling casualness. "Hey dear, you're home early," she said, not even glancing away from the soap opera playing on the TV. She had been lounging on the couch, wearing a worn-out robe, with a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table. Manuel frowned, taking in the scene. Yeah, just wanted to relax, he said, glancing around. Where's Lucy? Karen smirked. Oh, she called. Said she needs you to go with me to her cousin's place tonight. Manuel blinked, confused. Her cousin's place? Why? She's having her boss over here for a fun, wild night, Karen replied, her tone indifferent. She waved her hand dismissively, as if the words she just said were perfectly normal. You know, to celebrate, promotion talk, or something like that. Manuel's eyebrows knitted together. Celebrate? What the hell is there to celebrate? His voice was sharp, though he tried to stay calm. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically, finally turning to face him. Oh, Manuel, don't act like an idiot. Lucy's boss is into her. She's just playing along, you know? It's no big deal. Manuel's chest tightened, and he stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Playing along? What are you even talking about? Why do I have to go to her cousin's place? Karen gave him a pitying look, as if explaining something to a child. She didn't want you around tonight. Said you'd probably embarrass yourself. Manuel's heart pounded in his chest, his mind reeling. Embarrass myself? His voice was starting to rise. What the hell does that mean? I'm her husband. Why would I? Karen cut him off with a chuckle, her tone dripping with condescension. Manuel, it's just for fun. Norman likes her. They've been flirting for weeks. She thinks it'll help her get that promotion. Can't you see that? Manuel's face flushed with anger, and he took a step closer to her. What the hell are you saying? His voice was now a low growl, but Karen didn't seem the least bit concerned. Karen leaned back, raising her glass of wine with a smirk. She even told me your little 6-inch problem isn't exactly cutting it in the bedroom. What did you expect her to do? She's got needs, Manuel. A girl like Lucy can't settle for less, you know? Manuel's hands trembled as he clenched his fists. His mind was swirling with shock, disbelief, and a boiling rage he hadn't felt before. He could hardly breathe. You're serious? His voice cracked. You knew about this? You're her mother. Karen laughed bitterly, waving her hand again. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I know it hurts your pride, but this is how the real world works, Manuel. Lucy's just doing what's necessary for both of you. Manuel stared at her, stunned. His whole body was shaking now. The room around him blurred as his vision darkened with fury. Doing what's necessary? You think this is necessary? His voice was hoarse, filled with disbelief. Karen shrugged as though his anger was nothing more than an inconvenience. You should be thanking her. She's just trying to help both of you live better lives. You wouldn't understand. You're too small-minded. For a moment, Manuel couldn't speak. He felt like the ground beneath him was slipping away. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved and built a life with, was betraying him in the worst way possible. And Karen, her own mother, was not only aware of it, but complicit in the whole thing. Manuel's blood boiled, his vision sharpened, and without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed upstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He threw open the door to the bedroom, his breathing ragged, and yanked the suitcases from the closet. He didn't care about the mess. He tossed clothes, shoes, and anything he could find belonging to Lucy and Karen into the cases, rage fueling his every move. His hands shook as he zipped the bags closed, dragging them down the stairs one by one. Karen watched from the couch, unfazed by the scene unfolding before her. Manuel, calm down. You're overreacting. Manuel didn't respond. He could barely hear her through the white-hot anger searing through his mind. He dragged the suitcases to the front door, throwing them onto the porch with a loud thud. He turned back to Karen, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing. Get out! Karen blinked, finally taking her eyes off the TV. Excuse me? You heard me, Manuel spat, his voice deadly quiet. You and Lucy. Out of my house now. Karen narrowed her eyes, setting her wine glass down slowly. You're kicking us out? For what? For trying to help? Manuel took a step closer, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Help? You call this helping? Get out of my house. Karen stared at him for a moment, then huffed, standing up from the couch. You're going to regret this, Manuel. You're being unreasonable. Manuel stood his ground, his eyes burning with rage. I don't care what you think anymore. Karen muttering under her breath. Lucy's not going to take this well. You'll see. Manuel didn't respond. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air. His life, the life he thought he knew, was shattered. But in the back of his mind, the thought of revenge slowly began to form. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was late by the time Manuel heard the front door creak open. Lucy's laughter spilled into the house, carefree and light, but it was accompanied by the deep, smug chuckle of her boss, Norman Coleman. The sound made Manuel's stomach twist while rising in his throat. Standing in the dimly lit living room, Manuel could hear them clearly as they stepped inside, still caught up in their little world, oblivious to the storm awaiting them. He watched as Lucy and Norman crossed the threshold, her hand casually brushing his arm as they shared a private joke. Lucy's smile faltered when she saw Manuel standing motionless in the middle of the room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on them with a deadly calm. Norman, with his arrogant demeanor, looked Manuel up and down, the grin on his face widening, as if he relished the confrontation. "Well, looks like someone's home early," Norman said, his tone dripping with condescension. Lucy swallowed, her eyes flickering nervously between the two men. She forced a shaky smile, trying to play it off. "Manuel, why the fuck are you here now?" Manuel raised a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Congratulations," he said, his voice cold and flat, like ice cracking in the silence. "My slut wife and her whore of a mother have officially moved in with you, Norman. Good luck handling that." Lucy's face went pale, her smile vanishing as she stared at Manuel in shock. The arrogance in Norman's expression faltered, replaced by confusion. He glanced at the boxes neatly lined up by the door, suddenly realizing the gravity of the situation. What the hell are you talking about?" Lucy stammered, her eyes wide, darting between Manuel and Norman as though searching for some way out. Manuel stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You think I don't know?" His voice was calm, too calm, and that scared Lucy more than if he had yelled. "You've been screwing your boss behind my back, and your own mother helped you cover it up. This," he gestured toward Norman, "is the real reason for all those late nights and business dinners, isn't it?" Lucy's lips parted, but no words came out. Her face flushed with guilt, her body frozen as if caught in a nightmare. She took a shaky breath, trying to gather herself. "Manuel, listen, it's not—" "Oh, spare me." Manuel cut her off, his voice rising, his fists clenching at his sides. "I've heard enough excuses. You think I'm blind? That I don't know what's been going on in my own home?" Norman finally spoke up, stepping forward with a smug smirk. "Look, Manuel, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's just business. Lucy's ambitious. She's doing what's best for her career. There's no need to get all worked up." Manuel's eyes snapped to Norman, his blood boiling. He took a step toward him, fists still clenched. "You think this is just about business? You come into my house, into my marriage, and you think I'm going to stand here and let you disrespect me?" Norman raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. "Hey man, relax. We're both adults here. It's not personal." Manuel's hands trembled with the effort it took to restrain himself. He could feel the anger surging, but he fought to stay composed. "Not personal? You've been sleeping with my wife. You don't get to stand there and pretend this is some kind of professional arrangement." Lucy stepped between them, her voice shaking. "Manuel, please, let's just talk about this. We can work it out. It's not what you think." Manuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Work it out? You've been lying to me for months. You and your mother have been playing me for a fool, and now you want to talk." Karen appeared from the hallway, having heard the commotion. She approached with her usual air of entitlement, her face set in a dismissive frown. "Manuel, darling," she began in that patronizing tone he had grown to despise. "As I told you, you're overreacting. This is just how things are in the real world. Lucy's doing this for both of you." Manuel's eyes darkened, and he turned to face her, barely able to contain his rage. "For both of us?" He spat, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You think betraying me, humiliating me, is somehow for my benefit?" Karen crossed her arms, looking down her nose at him. "You have to understand how things work. Lucy needs this promotion. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made." Manuel could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. He glanced between Lucy, Norman, and Karen, seeing the betrayal etched on all their faces. The anger he'd been holding back for so long finally erupted. Before anyone could react, Manuel grabbed one of the boxes by the door and hurled it onto the front porch. "You want to live that life? Fine, but not in my house." Lucy flinched as the box hit the ground with a loud thud. "Manuel, stop. Let's talk about this, please." But Manuel was done listening. He grabbed another box and tossed it outside. "Get out," he growled, his voice deadly serious. "All of you, out of my house." Norman, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, stepped forward, his tone still smug but now laced with irritation. "Come on, Manuel. Let's not do anything rash here. You're acting like a child." Manuel's eyes flicked to Norman, cold and hard. "I'm acting like a man who's been betrayed. Now get out before I throw you out." Lucy reached for Manuel's arm, but he pulled away, his voice filled with finality. "It's over, Lucy. You made your choice. Now you can live with it." Karen stepped forward, still trying to maintain control. "You'll regret this, Manuel. You're throwing away your marriage over nothing." Manuel's laugh was bitter, cutting through the tension. "Nothing? This is everything, Karen. You've poisoned our marriage from the start. Now you can go live with your lies somewhere else." With one final shove, he threw the last box onto the porch. He turned back to face them, his face set in stone. "Get out, and don't ever come back." Lucy stood there, tears welling in her eyes, but she knew there was no way back. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. With her shoulders slumped, she grabbed Norman's arm, and the two of them walked out the door, Karen trailing behind. As the door slammed shut behind them, Manuel stood in the silence, his heart still racing, but for the first time in months, he felt a strange sense of peace. It was over. They were gone. The first day after Lucy left, Manuel expected a storm of emotions. Rage, heartbreak, regret. But instead, he felt numb. He deleted her number from his phone, blocked her on every platform, and started the process of filing for divorce. His actions were mechanical, each step taken with cold determination. The betrayal had broken something inside him, but he wasn't about to let Lucy, or anyone else, see the pieces. The phone calls began the very next day. Lucy's name flashed across his screen, her picture smiling at him as if nothing had changed. At first, Manuel stared at the phone, his fingers hovering over the answer button, but the thought of hearing her voice made his stomach turn. He let the call go to voicemail. Then another call came, and another. Each time, he ignored her, the calls piling up, but the flood of messages stayed untouched. On the third day, the phone buzzed again. This time, Karen's name appeared. Manuel felt a surge of anger as he watched the screen light up. Karen had enabled this whole mess, acting like Lucy's betrayal was justified, even necessary. He let her call ring out, too. After another barrage of calls, Manuel decided to listen to the first voicemail from Lucy. Her voice was shaky, vulnerable, so different from the confident woman he once knew. "Manuel, please, I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I made a mistake. I never meant for things to get this far. Please, just call me back. We can fix this." Manuel's jaw clenched as he listened. There was no regret in her voice, only panic. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry that she'd been caught. He deleted the message without a second thought. The next few weeks were filled with the same routine. Lucy kept calling, and Karen followed suit, but Manuel remained unmoved. His focus shifted entirely to the divorce. The scandal of the affair quickly spread through their office, and it wasn't long before Norman Coleman's name was being whispered in every corner of the building. Word spread that Lucy's affair with Norman had been exposed. Manuel filed for divorce and made sure it was public. He didn't do it out of spite. Well, maybe a little, but because he wanted everyone to know what had happened. He wasn't going to let Lucy and Norman get away with quietly sweeping this mess under the rug. He wanted the world to see them for what they were. Meanwhile, Lucy stayed with Norman, convinced that her new life had just begun. She had lost Manuel, but she thought Norman would be her future now. She imagined they'd continue their affair in the open, that Norman would support her, maybe even promote her after the dust settled. But the cracks in her fantasy began to show almost immediately. At first, Norman treated her with the same smug charm that had lured her into the affair. They spent a few nights at fancy restaurants, enjoying the thrill of being out in the open. But soon, the excitement of the forbidden relationship faded. Norman was no longer the charming, attentive man who had pursued her so relentlessly during their secret rendezvous. He became distant, treating her like an inconvenience rather than the center of his world. Lucy noticed the change when he started working late without telling her. She tried calling him, just like she had called Manuel before, but Norman's responses became short and dismissive. He was always busy or stuck in meetings. She could sense that something was wrong, but she didn't want to admit it, not after everything she had sacrificed. Then one day, Lucy showed up at Norman's office unannounced. She was expecting to surprise him, maybe reignite the spark they had lost. But when she walked into his office, she found Norman with a new woman, a younger, attractive assistant, giggling at his desk. The look on Norman's face when he saw Lucy wasn't one of guilt or regret. It was one of mild annoyance, as if she had walked in on something trivial. "Lucy," Norman said flatly, barely glancing at her. "What are you doing here?" Lucy's heart pounded in her chest. "What's going on? Who is she?" Norman leaned back in his chair, sighing heavily. "Lucy, I don't have time for this right now. I'm working." "Working? With her?" Lucy's voice trembled as she gestured at the assistant. Norman waved her off dismissively. "We're done, Lucy. I've moved on. It's over. Go back to whatever you were doing." Lucy froze, her world crumbling around her. You're dumping me?" Norman didn't even bother to stand. He shrugged as if the answer was obvious. "What did you think was going to happen? We had our fun, but it's time to move on. You should have known that." Lucy's eyes welled up with tears. "But you promised me. I thought we were—" "I never promised you anything," Norman said, cutting her off sharply. "Get out of my office, Lucy. You're making a scene." Lucy stood there, humiliated, as the assistant smirked at her from behind Norman's desk. Without another word, Lucy turned and walked out, her mind reeling. She had thrown away her marriage, her life, for this man, and now he was casting her aside like she was nothing. A few days later, Lucy received a formal notice from Norman's office. She had been fired. No explanation, no apology, just a clean cut. Norman had moved on to his next conquest, and Lucy was left with nothing. Meanwhile, Karen tried to support Lucy, but the tension between them grew unbearable. Their once arrogant, close relationship quickly soured as they both realized how far they had fallen. With no job and no home, they bounced between cheap motels, barely scraping by. The power dynamics had shifted completely. Karen, who once lorded over Manuel's house like a queen, was now reduced to a bystander in her daughter's ruined life. "What are we going to do now?" Lucy asked one night, her voice hollow. Karen sighed, her usual condescending tone gone. "We'll figure something out. We always do." But there was no confidence behind her words. They both knew the truth. They had nothing left. No home, no job, and no future. As Manuel watched from a distance, he saw their descent into chaos unfold. Every call they made, every desperate attempt to reach him, was met with silence. For the first time in a long while, Manuel felt like he was in control of his life again. He didn't need their apologies. He didn't need closure. He had already won. Months had passed, and life for Manuel Hunter was starting to look brighter. He had thrown himself into his work, rising quickly in his career while the weight of betrayal began to lift from his shoulders. Every day was filled with purpose again. Morning runs, business meetings, dinners with new friends. He had even started dating casually, testing the waters of a life he had never expected to live again. The nights were no longer haunted by Lucy's laughter or Karen's sharp voice criticizing every little thing. His home was finally his, filled with the peace that had been missing for far too long. But for Lucy and Karen, life had taken a sharp nosedive. They had lost everything. After Norman dumped Lucy and fired her from her job, the reality of their situation hit hard. No more luxurious dinners, no more shopping sprees, and no more comfortable evenings in a house they didn't own. The months of homelessness that followed eroded the arrogance that had once defined them. Moving from one cheap motel to another, relying on small favors from people who quickly grew tired of them, their pride withered with every passing day. Then, one cold autumn afternoon, a knock came at Manuel's door. He wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, he wondered if it was a delivery. But when he opened the door, his heart sank in disbelief. There stood Lucy and Karen, the two women who had torn his life apart, looking like shadows of their former selves. Lucy's once perfectly styled hair hung limp around her face, her clothes wrinkled and faded, a far cry from the polished woman she used to be. Karen stood beside her, her usually sharp eyes now dulled by fatigue. Her proud posture was gone, replaced by a slumped figure that seemed beaten by the weight of their downfall. Manuel, Lucy's voice was thin, a whisper carried by the wind. We need your help." Manuel's expression remained neutral, though inside his emotions churned. He couldn't deny the flicker of satisfaction that seeing them like this brought, but he also felt the weight of their presence dragging him back to a place he thought he had escaped. "You've got some nerve," Manuel said, his voice cold as ice. He stepped out onto the porch, crossing his arms as he stared at the two women. "What do you want?" Lucy bit her lip, struggling to find the words. "We're sorry for everything. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But we've lost everything, Manuel. We have nowhere to go, no money, nothing. Please, just let us stay here for a little while, until we can figure something out." Karen, standing behind Lucy, tried to regain some composure. "It's been hard, Manuel," she added, her voice shaking. We never meant for things to get so bad. We thought we were doing what was best." Manuel's eyes narrowed, a dark chuckle escaping his lips. "Best for who? You thought betraying me, humiliating me, and destroying everything we had was best. You must be joking." Lucy's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she stepped closer. "I was wrong, Manuel. I know that now. But you have to understand, I didn't think it would end like this. I thought I could have a new life with Norman, but he used me, and then he left me with nothing." "That's what you get for trusting a man who cheats," Manuel replied, his voice laced with venom. "But that's your problem, not mine." Karen, desperate to salvage what little pride she had left, chimed in. "We're not asking for much, Manuel. Just a roof over our heads for a little while. You don't have to forgive us, just help us. Please." Manuel looked at them both, taking in their pitiful state. For a moment, he let the silence stretch between them, making them squirm. He could see the desperation in their eyes, the cracks in the armor they had worn for so long. They were broken, completely undone by their own choices. And now, after all the lies, after the betrayal, they had come crawling back to him. He shook his head slowly, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "You really think I'm that stupid? After everything you did? You think I'd let you back into my house, into my life, like nothing happened?" Lucy sobbed openly now, her hands clasped together in a pleading gesture. "Manuel, please. I don't know what else to do. We're begging you." Manuel stepped forward, his face inches from hers, his voice a low growl. "You should have thought about that before you slept with your boss. You should have thought about that before you let your mother convince you that I wasn't enough." Karen tried to speak, but Manuel cut her off with a sharp look. "Don't you even try to defend yourself. You were just as guilty as she was. In fact, you're worse. You encouraged her. You fed her lies, and you thought you'd get away with it." Karen's mouth snapped shut, her face pale. Manuel straightened, taking a deep breath before delivering the final blow. "I want you both to leave. Now, get off my property before I call the cops." Lucy gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Manuel, please. We don't have anywhere else to go." "That's not my problem," Manuel replied, his voice calm but firm. "You made your bed. Now you can lie in it." Karen's face twisted with anger for a brief second, but she quickly swallowed it down, knowing they had no power left. They were at Manuel's mercy, and he had none to give. Lucy's shoulders slumped in defeat, her sobs growing quieter as she realized there would be no forgiveness, no second chance. Slowly, she turned and began walking away, Karen following behind her without a word. Manuel stood there, watching as they disappeared down the street, their figures hunched against the cold. He felt no regret, no sympathy. The people who had tried to destroy him were finally facing the consequences of their actions. And as the door clicked shut behind him, Manuel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. This time, the peace was real, not because he had regained control of his life, but because he had finally closed the door on the past for good. Months turned into a year, and Manuel Hunter found himself standing in front of the large window of his new apartment, overlooking the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the streets below, and he couldn't help but reflect on how much his life had changed. It was as if the storm that had once torn through his life had passed, leaving nothing but clarity and peace in its wake. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. He turned, smiling as Jenna, his new girlfriend, stepped into the room with 2 glasses of wine. She was everything Lucy wasn't: kind, supportive, and genuine. With her, Manuel didn't have to second-guess every word or action. There were no lies, no games, just mutual respect and love. "Lost in thought again?" Jenna asked playfully, handing him a glass. Manuel chuckled, shaking his head, just thinking about how different things are now. Jenna leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Different in a good way, I hope?" "In the best way," Manuel replied, taking a sip of his wine. He looked down at her, appreciating the warmth she brought into his life. Her presence was like a steadying force that had helped him rebuild after everything had crumbled. With her, he didn't just survive, he thrived. They stood in silence for a moment, enjoying the peaceful evening, the kind of peace Manuel once thought he'd never find again. The memory of Lucy's betrayal still lingered at the back of his mind, but it no longer held the power over him that it once did. Time and Jenna's love had dulled the pain, replacing it with something stronger: confidence in himself. A year ago, Manuel never would have imagined standing in this place, emotionally and physically. The person he had been then, angry, hurt, betrayed, was gone. In his place stood a man who had rebuilt his life from the ground up, stronger for the trials he had faced. But that didn't mean he hadn't enjoyed watching the downfall of the people who had wronged him. He hadn't gone out of his way to keep tabs on Lucy and Karen, but word still reached him from time to time. Their downfall had been swift and brutal. After Manuel had kicked them out, Lucy and Karen had struggled to survive. Without Norman's support, Lucy couldn't find another job in the same industry. News of her affair had spread quickly after Manuel's divorce filing, and her reputation was ruined. No company wanted to hire someone involved in such a scandal, and Karen's constant meddling didn't help matters. The two of them bounced from one cheap motel to the next, unable to hold down a job long enough to afford anything better. Karen's arrogance only deepened their problems, as her pride made it impossible for them to accept help from the few friends they had left. They had no one but each other, and their one strong bond crumbled under the pressure. Manuel had heard from a mutual acquaintance that Lucy and Karen's relationship had deteriorated, filled with constant arguments and blame shifting. Lucy blamed her mother for pushing her into the affair, while Karen blamed Lucy for being weak and ruining their chance at security. Manuel didn't revel in their misery, but he couldn't deny the satisfaction that came with knowing they had reaped what they had sown. The life they had chosen, the deceit, the betrayal, had led them exactly where they deserved to be. "Hey," Jenna said, pulling him from his thoughts again. She looked up at him with a soft smile. "You okay?" Manuel nodded, setting his glass down on the table. "Yeah, I'm more than okay. Just thinking about how far we've come." Jenna tilted her head, studying him. "You mean after everything with Lucy?" He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "A part of me thought I'd never recover from that. I thought I'd always carry that weight. But now," he trailed off, unable to find the right words. "But now you're free," Jenna finished for him, her voice gentle but firm. "You've let go of that chapter." "Yeah," Manuel agreed, wrapping an arm around her waist. "I have. It's over." And it was, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't haunted by the past. Lucy and Karen were nothing more than distant memories now, lessons in what not to allow back into his life. Jenna smiled, sensing the shift in him. "Good. Because you deserve this, Manuel. You deserve to be happy. Manuel pulled her closer, kissing her on the forehead. I am happy, happier than I've ever been. They spent the rest of the evening together, laughing, talking about their future, and planning the small vacation they had coming up. For Manuel, the future was no longer a dark, uncertain place. He had control over his life again, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. Later that night, after Jenna had fallen asleep, Manuel sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. He thought back to the man he had been, married to a woman who had used him, disrespected him, and thrown their life away for a cheap thrill. He was no longer that man. He was better, stronger. Lucy and Karen were still out there somewhere, probably struggling to survive, but that didn't matter to him anymore. They had made their choices, and Manuel had made his. He had chosen to live, to rebuild, and to move forward. They had chosen the opposite. Manuel smiled to himself as he watched the lights flicker in the distance. He had finally closed the chapter on that part of his life, and he was never looking back. And with that thought, Manuel turned away from the window, ready to embrace the new life he had built, one filled with love, respect, and peace.